Yo, 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 welcome to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. And before we get into this, ladies and gents, now I want to offer you this free metabolic assessment. I'm going to offer it to you again because we've had such life-changing value that we've been bringing to people through this metabolic assessment process, which I normally only use for clients. But I do want to offer you this, and basically it's going to give you, once again, a metabolic score, which tells you, the fastest and most effective path to take to get the best results possible, whether you're going to be fat loss, build a muscle, or both. And also, obviously, it's going to help you level up your metabolic health and longevity, right? So all you got to do is just click the link beneath this video or podcast, and you will get that metabolic score for free and direction in terms of exactly what to do to level up. So anyway, today I wanted to touch on something I was observing on my recent trip away, finally back in Sydney now, and all or nothing mentality, right? Now, this is what most people struggle with. And when you look around, when you look at people who've really optimized their health and they look amazing physically all year round, either one, they've overcome the all or nothing mentality or the on or off mentality, whatever you want to call it, or two, fortunately, they've never really had those struggles. But let me tell you, most people have. I used to be world's worst, right? As many of you may know, I used to binge eat a lot. I used to party a lot in my 20s and everything else, and I had to overcome these struggles, right? So this is going to be the only way you're going to get that next level physique. You're going to get to a point where it actually feels easy being in amazing shape all year round, right? So I'm going to break this podcast into two categories. Number one is going to be the mindset element, right? So this is always the most important thing, of course, is your mindset and your resilience and persistence when it comes to taking action, discipline, and not giving up, essentially. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But one of the most common things I see with my best clients, and most of my clients are generally like type A personalities. They're already in motion. When they reached out to me, they're already in motion with their training, but they really wanted to get to that next level and fine tune their nutrition and training and lifestyle so they can maximize results and look better and perform and feel better. And perfectionism is one of the number one self-sabotage superpowers. That's what I like to call. We all have different self-sabotage superpowers, and perfectionism is one of the most common ones. So what happens there is people, when they're not perfect, so for example, you might have a social event on the weekend, birthday or just a general social event where you're catching up with people. You may be in an environment where, people are eating more, drinking more, and you end up just kind of slipping up, right? Now, firstly, all of my highest performing clients give themselves permission to slip up. Hell, even I give myself permission to slip up at times, right? Although it happens less frequently nowadays, thankfully. But giving yourself that permission to slip up is number one. But don't get me wrong, you can't fucking slip up all the time and expect to be in amazing shape. And when you do slip up and you're not perfect, and then the next day, this is the crucial mistake that you make, my friend, right? The next day or whatever, you then go, fuck it. You hit the off button, the big shiny red off button, and then you're back to square one because then you've just let it bleed into another day or the whole weekend of essentially not giving a fuck and slip in for the whole weekend. And then you try and bounce back on Monday, and essentially the same cycle repeats itself. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to do that sometimes on weekends or holidays or whatever. But if you're doing that all the time where you make one mistake or you have one slip up, you might drink or eat too much, and then you say, there's no point now. That is the crucial mistake. And it's not rocket science, right? But that is ultimately what it is. It's very, very simple. And that comes down to what I was saying, is mental fortitude, is resilience. You have to have the ability to just get back to normal the next day, right? And when you slip up in a window of time, like let's say you have an evening or whatever, where you eat and drink loads, okay. If you're doing it all day, that's what I've said before in another podcast, I don't agree with cheat days, because essentially you've got underlying issues which are not being addressed. If you're hitting the off button for a whole day and you're making a habit of that, not good. So long story short, perfectionism, trying to be perfect, doesn't exist. You have to look at, number one, everyone I've coached, hundreds of people I've had great transformations with. Most of them did struggle with perfectionism at some point, trying to be perfect with everything. And then they realize they have to let go and they have to focus on, progress over perfection, right? When you just keep going and you're doing the right things and implementing the right things for the most part, you're going to get into insane shape, but you're never going to get there when you keep hitting that off button on a regular occasion, right? Another thing is, it could be, for example, socials, not just socials, like work events. It could be when you're traveling. It could be those kind of things when you're out of your usual kind of routine. And then because you're not perfect, you stop doing all those fundamental habits that you normally do. And it's that cascade effect of things which do have a really big effect on your results and the psychological impact. So that's why I always say there's three big rocks, really, when it comes to getting and staying in shape. If you want to really simplify things, I'm not going to go into sleep, but you've got strength training, movement, and nutrition. Two of those have to be dialed at all times. So, for example, I had a recent client, he's gone away at a work trip, he's traveled around a lot. And I said, look, you just got to increase your steps, right? Do more movement to mitigate the damage through maybe some of the food you drink in, some alcohol or whatever, and just do, non-negotiable amount of workouts each week, even if it is bands and body weight and you can't get to a gym. So two of those boxes have to be ticked. So it's consistency over perfection is number one. Number two, obviously environment. I've talked about this before. I did a whole podcast on this. Is your partner making you fat? And this is a big thing. This is the biggest challenge for most people is social influence. Or you could have a close friend, one of your best friends, who basically drinks too much or eats too much or both. And then guess what? They're going to influence you, right? And I always say it's much easier to avoid temptation than it is to resist it, right? So when you're constantly around that, you are not going to get to the level you want to get to. And if you do, it's going to be very, very hard. And there's nothing wrong with kind of spending less time with those people. If it's really important to you, if your health is really important to you and being in really good shape physically and mentally, then you have to cut ties with those people or just see them less frequently. Or better still, just communicate what your vision is and what you're trying to achieve. And if they don't understand that and they try pulling you down, then obviously it's just not meant to be that relationship. Right now, I'm not a relationship expert. I'm not telling anyone to do anything drastic. Ultimately, the environment and social influence is the most important thing. And I've said this before, if you've got one friend, if your close friend is obese, for example, then you've got, I think it's pretty much a 50% chance, higher chance of becoming obese yourself, right? So it goes to show how important that circle is, right? Your net worth is your network, right? And that comes down to your net worth in terms of how you look, feel, how long you live, right? You could say that's your net worth. We could relate it to finances and stuff, but how you look, how you feel, how you perform, your ability to inspire others. Because let's be honest, when you're in great shape, you take care of yourself, you eat well for the most part, you basically take care of yourself. People start looking up to you, and you can inspire more people. And if you've got kids, even better, right? Because kids they're very good, right? In terms of observing things. I don't think we give them enough credit for how much they look at your actions. Your words don't mean nothing if you're not backing it up. So that environment's really, really important when it comes to the all or nothing. So you've got someone who's sabotaging all the time, well, they just normalized, eating like an asshole, like I say all the time, then guess what? Good luck trying to level up, right? It's going to be really, really tough. And then sabotage behaviors. I've talked about, self-sabotage superpowers. Like perfectionism is one of them, where if someone's not perfect or they haven't tracked everything when they're tracking their food in the week and they don't track on the weekend, then they hit the off button, right? And then that holds them back from getting to their full potential. Another one is emotional eating, right? We'll eat our feelings, right? If there's a void or if we are lacking connection, or if we simply have food available in the house. There's lots of different things which can trigger that, right? Psychological stuff, boredom, whatever it is. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but ultimately, emotional eating is another example of self-sabotage behaviors, right? And that comes down to all or nothing mentality. You're either on the wagon or you're off the wagon. And this is most people, my friend. Let me tell you now, most people really, really struggle with this, right? And then number three, then another one we give an example is, people struggle with procrastination. A lot of people procrastinate a lot on the stuff they should be doing, whether that's getting in shape, work, whatever that is, relationship. And ultimately, remember, the hard thing to do is most of the time the right thing to do. I'll say that again. The hard thing that you should be doing, whether that's your health or relationships or whatever, is normally the right thing to do, right? So remember that. So it all ties into self-sabotage and the all or nothing mentality. When you're on or off, when you're in or out, I can keep saying it in a million different ways, you're never going to get to that next level. Like the physique I built, I've had to overcome that and get to a point where, yes, I still slip at times, it's rare, but I get to a point where I just eat foods I enjoy and life is good. I don't drink much nowadays, but I've got to a point where I don't desire those things. And that's because self-discipline needs to be rewarded, right? And people always say, you've got so much willpower, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there is some willpower involved. Obviously, I'm disciplined, but that's part of Martin Silva. That's who I've become. It doesn't feel like willpower. I don't feel restricted, right? I don't feel tempted by the processed foods. It doesn't register as real food to me anymore because I'm satisfied. I mean, who's not going to be satisfied with eating steak and eggs every day or beef mince and eggs? And then in the evening, every day now, right? I've been having full-fat Greek yogurt, have peanut butter or almond butter, and a load of fruit in the evenings. Like, who gets bored of that? Dark chocolate most days, 90%. coffee in the mornings. Like life is good. I don't feel restricted. I don't feel like I'm relying on willpower. You can't rely on willpower to be in great shape all year round because willpower is like a muscle. It's going to get fatigued. So I want to just summarize with a few strategic points for you, right? Number one is something, maybe I'll do a whole podcast on this, but the number one mistake on a strategic level or a tactical level where people screw up is not having enough breakfast for protein. Protein for breakfast. Now, people tend to have like a moderate amount for lunch on average and a decent amount for dinner, a low amount for breakfast. Worse, they're eating sugary stuff for breakfast. Even if it's, bloody cereals, grabbing something on the go, like a bloody, I don't know, like a pastry or something with their coffee on the way to work. Those kind of things will actually stimulate appetite. The most important thing you can do on a strategic level to help overcome the all or nothing mentality a little bit, right? Is by actually having a high protein breakfast, which you enjoy. Some examples are, with my clients, they'll have like leftover beef from the night before, like beef mince, for example, or beef patties with eggs and avocado. Or if you're not going to enjoy that kind of thing, not everyone's going to enjoy eating something like that, which is what I have every day for my first meal. I have 2 meals a day. And even like worst case, if you're not going to eat like what you would normally eat for dinner for breakfast, like meat and vegetables, for example, or meat, eggs, and avocado, then, even a protein shake, right? 30 grams worth of protein powder, blended up with some berries, right? Berries are fruit that are low in sugar and low in calories and high in fiber. And then perhaps you can maybe add some fats to that to make it more of a complete meal, such as like half an avocado or something like that. So those kind of things, and making sure you have at least 30, 40 to 50 grams of protein for breakfast. It's going to dictate your whole day, basically. And also just hitting protein. If you don't have that for breakfast, then it's hard to hit your overall protein intake because then you're scrambling trying to hit whatever you're trying to hit for lunch and dinner. You're trying to get your whole daily protein intake into 2 meals. And not everyone's like me. You're not going to be able to do that. So you're constantly going to leave it a chance. And then if you're not having enough protein, you're going to eat more fats and carbs. And therefore, you're going to eat more calories and you're always going to be, essentially, I'll just say it how it is, fatter than you want to be, right? So yeah, and another simple thing as well with the all or nothing mentality is really just adding instead of subtracting. So always trying to hit protein, trying to making sure that you're basically adding foods in that you need to do. You're getting salt onto your meals if you're eating mainly whole foods, right? Because that's gonna, people mistake sugar. Sugar craving. They're just not having enough salt. Fiber if you can tolerate vegetables and salad or one of the two loading up your plate with vegetables and salad, getting that fiber in. So searching for protein mainly, fiber, essential fats, those kind of things, salt, instead of taking away all your favorite foods and trying to restrict is a much better approach if you want to get into great shape. Because when you hit those targets, naturally, you'll make better decisions for food. It's a very simple way to overcome the all or nothing mentality. And that's how I overcame it. I could do a whole nother podcast on that. It was by adding in the kind of foods that I mentioned and obviously changing my environment and everything else. I moved to Australia. So that wasn't just how I did it. I wouldn't recommend moving to the other side of the country. It just happened at the same time. So that's pretty much it, ladies and gents. In a nutshell, another big one, a strategic one. Again, I should probably do a whole podcast on this, is people mistake hunger for thirst, right? So they don't drink enough water. And then when they think they're hungry and they reach for food, they're just not hydrating. You got to get used to drinking enough water. And if you can do this simple thing of having a pint of water before you reach for coffee in the morning, hydrate when you get up, it'll be an absolute game changer. And that all relates to the all or nothing mentality and consistency, right? So I'll finish with this with self-discipline needs to be rewarded, remember. And secondly, basically click the link below and get your free metabolic assessment. All right, over and out. Speak soon.